How well do you really know Tennessee? Because across 42,000 square miles and more than 2 centuries of statehood, there's always another story waiting to be discovered. The growing Tennessee History Nerd catalog takes you from the Scopes monkey trial and the Battle of Athens to the Night Riders of Reelfoot Lake, the Sultana disaster, the failed state of Franklin, the Iron Men of Sewanee, and much more. And in the Driving Across Tennessee series, we travel county by county to uncover the people, places, communities, and stories that help shape the volunteer state. You'll also find full-length conversations with historians, authors, museum professionals, local experts, and the people working to preserve Tennessee's past. And new episodes and interviews are added every week. Follow the Tennessee History Nerd from your favorite podcast app, explore the catalog, and discover another Tennessee story you never knew you needed to hear. Now, let's get into the story. Welcome to the Tennessee History Nerd. This is a podcast dedicated to Tennessee's past. Every week we bring you a new story about the people, places, and events that have shaped Tennessee and made it and us who and what we are. So grab your favorite beverage, find a comfortable place, and sit back and enjoy. Tennessee is a big state. Not Texas, California, or Alaska big, but to drive from Johnson City to Memphis, that's about a 500-mile drive. So when we're talking about comprehensively covering the stories of the state, it's a big task. It helps to take it in bite-sized chunks, and one way is a county at a time. So, as promised when we began the podcast, we're going to do that. We're going to drive across the state one county at a time, and frankly, the easiest and probably most ecumenical way to do that is to take the counties alphabetically. But in this particular episode, we're going out of alphabetical order for a week because in this county spotlight, number 6, we're driving across a county that no longer officially exists, and you won't find it on any list of Tennessee counties for the last 100 years. And that's the forgotten county of James County, Tennessee. And we're looking at its story this week. So make sure you've got your sunglasses on, your drink in the cup holder, and your seatbelt fastened. We're on the road, and we're headed into the forgotten county of James, old James County, Tennessee. In the early 1990s, country singer Alan Jackson sang, "Oh, How I Wish Dallas Was in Tennessee." Of course, that line came from his hit song Dallas, which reached number 1 on the country charts in March 1992. And to be clear, he was singing about a woman named Dallas who wasn't content to stay with her husband in Tennessee and was returning to Texas. And so technically, he wasn't singing about the Texas city by that name. But Dallas as a town actually existed in Tennessee, even before it existed in Texas. And without getting too far into the details we'll be sharing in the Driving Across Hamilton County episode that'll be coming in several weeks, the old town of Dallas, Tennessee was the first permanent county seat of Hamilton County. Now, just so you know, if you go looking for old Dallas today, you'll have to do that mostly with sonar or by scuba diving because nearly all of the historic town was covered by the waters of Chickamauga Lake when it was impounded in 1940. In 1840, the county seat had already moved across the Tennessee River to Vansville, which was renamed Harrison in 1841. And by the way, most of that town also was flooded by Chickamauga Lake at the same time as Dallas. And then in 1870, the county seat had moved again from Harrison to Chattanooga. This last bit of information matters greatly for today's story because that move of the county seat from Harrison to Chattanooga was very much to the displeasure of the folks in Harrison. And that ultimately helped to lead to the formation of the county we're considering today, that forgotten county of James County, Tennessee. Little James County came into being during the turbulent years following the Civil War, being created on January 30th, 1871, and it lasted until just after World War I when it was dissolved and then absorbed by Hamilton County in 1919. In the 48 years it existed, part of it seceded and went back to Hamilton County. It fought a Supreme Court battle for its very existence. It had 2 courthouses burn, and yet most Tennesseans likely have never even heard of it. And at its root, I guess you could say that the main reasons that James County came into existence were because of the railroad, more specifically where it ran, and because of jealousy. During the Civil War, Chattanooga was the site of a major battle, and that was primarily because it was a major rail hub. General Ulysses S. Grant recognized the value of logistics in defeating the South and had made it a priority to attack logistical nodes, and that included Chattanooga for both the riverport and rail hub there. When Hamilton County was created back in 1819, it had no town to serve as county seat, and the courts for Hamilton County first met at a place called Poe's Tavern near modern-day Daisy. A settlement was created about 1822 at the log courthouse on the west bank of the Tennessee River, initially called Hamilton, and then later renamed Dallas in about 1833. And Dallas had the distinction at that time of being the only town on the Tennessee River below Ray County. A few years later, when the Cherokees were forced westward on the Trail of Tears and the lands they were forced to forfeit were reallocated among the whites, the former estate of wealthy Cherokee planter Joseph Van, just across the Tennessee River from Dallas to the southeast, was purchased and subdivided for the town of Vansville. Some sources call this Vanville. Vansville was then renamed in 1840 or 1841 as Harrison in honor of President William Henry Harrison. And because Vansville grew in both size and prominence, the county seat was moved from Dallas to Harrison at roughly the same time the town was renamed. And there it remained for almost 30 years. Through the Civil War, Harrison remained the preference for the majority of Hamilton County residents for its county seat, and it wasn't an insignificant town for the time. It had 2 hotels, the courthouse and jail, and a local newspaper. By 1870, though, that had changed. As Polly Donnelly noted in her history of James County, quote, in 1870, an effort was made to move the county seat to a more accessible location in Chattanooga. Poor road conditions requiring almost a day's travel to reach Harrison were cited as reason for the proposed change. The state legislature approved a referendum to determine whether Chattanooga or Harrison would be the county seat, and an election was held November 18. Chattanooga won by a large majority, although some people at Ooltewah and Harrison claimed that the voting was fraudulent. While efforts were being made to prevent the move, the records were taken to Chattanooga before the restraining order reached Harrison, end quote. After the Civil War, New South industry had been more inclined to move to Chattanooga, and it was not only more central to the population concentration in Hamilton County than Harrison, it also had better river ports, and it had the railroads. In spite of the steadfast belief and lobbying of the residents of Harrison in the years leading up to the Civil War that they would become a stop on the railroad, the rails had completely bypassed them. But Chattanooga had become one of the most important rail hubs in the South. This last fact was true whether there had been chicanery in the referendum voting or not. But when the referendum vote named Chattanooga as the new county seat, they fought the move by attempting to file a court injunction to keep the seat in Harrison, and they did everything they could to keep the county seat from being moved, but to no avail. And so, in bitterness, in jealousy, in spite, who knows exactly what motivated the move, the citizens in Harrison and around that area petitioned the state government to form another county, and that bid succeeded. The new county was named for Jesse James, not the outlaw, but rather for the Methodist minister father of the state representative who had proposed the bill to form the new county, Elbert A. James. But, in a cruel twist of fate insofar as Harrison was concerned, when the combined citizens of all of the new county of James voted on where to locate the county seat, Harrison was again snubbed. The town of Ooltewah was selected, and to add insult to injury, that infernal railroad that had also snubbed Harrison ran directly through Ooltewah. Many in the Harrison area were reportedly almost immediately to have lobbied to have their lands to revert back to Hamilton County. Now, to be fair to the folks from Harrison who didn't want to lose the county seat to Chattanooga, getting to Chattanooga from Harrison in the latter half of the 19th century would not have been an easy proposition. One can easily understand why the residents of Harrison fought to hold on to the site of county seat. But just as fairly, the same held true in reverse for those elsewhere in the county who needed to get to the county seat when it was in Harrison. The roads run both ways, even when they run over the hills and mountains. Folks, if you're looking for a great Tennessee getaway, let me tell you about Birdsong Resort, Marina, and Campground. Located on beautiful Kentucky Lake on the scenic Tennessee River, Birdsong is just 9 miles off Interstate 40 at exit 133, making it an easy drive halfway between Memphis and Nashville. The Keast family has proudly owned and operated Birdsong since 1961, and today the second generation of Keasts continues that tradition of excellent hospitality. Birdsong offers cabins, full-service RV sites, primitive tent camping, boat rentals, boat sales, fuel, bait, and a large concrete boat ramp for easy access to Kentucky Lake. While you're there, don't miss the Tennessee River Freshwater Pearl Museum, where you'll discover Tennessee's official state gem, the freshwater pearl, and learn how the freshwater pearl industry brought worldwide attention to this part of Tennessee. To start planning your getaway, visit birdsong.com or call 731-584-7880. That's birdsong.com or call 731-584-7880. Birdsong Resort, Marina, and Campground. I think you'll be glad you went. And when you call them, tell them Big John sent you. So thus, the dissatisfaction felt by the residents of Harrison over the move of the county seat to Chattanooga is why many of those residents began almost immediately to lobby for a change. At first, by possibly leaving Hamilton County to join neighboring Bradley County, but ultimately they fought for the creation of a new county. The obvious assumption was that Harrison was the logical choice as county seat for such a county. And once again, to be completely fair, Harrison was more centrally located geographically than Ooltewah in long, narrow James County. But as best as I can tell now, which may or may not be accurate, the population concentration of James County in the early 1870s perhaps skewed more heavily to the southern third of the county in the areas around Ooltewah, Thatcher Switch, which is modern-day Collegedale, and Appleton. And some of that may also be due to the fact that the new county being created wasn't just going to be disaffected Hamilton Countyans. Some of the residents of southwestern Bradley County also wanted to be included in the new county, being dissatisfied with being a good distance away from the Bradley County seat of Cleveland and having to deal with poor roads and impassable streams for part of each year. These former Bradley County folks would have found themselves a good distance from Harrison, maybe even farther than they'd been from Cleveland. So in late April 1871, the referendum was held to determine the site of the permanent county seat for James County. And as one might expect, even more animosity was created when 63 votes from a district to the north of Harrison were thrown out for failing to specify the town intended. With these ballots disallowed, which one reasonably might assume were most likely intended to have been for Harrison, Ooltewah received the majority of the votes. Harrison again sought redress in the courts and again was disappointed with the results when Judge John B. Hoyle ruled late in May in favor of Ooltewah. And so, much to the disgust of the Harrison residents, Ooltewah in the south end of the county became the county seat of James County. Some sources suggest that the old Hamilton County Courthouse in Harrison was dismantled and moved to Ooltewah to become the first James County Courthouse, although at least one source says its bricks were loaded on 2 barges to be transferred to Chattanooga instead, but sank in the Tennessee River not far from the shore. I've traveled between Ooltewah and the area of Harrison Bay on Chickamauga Lake, where the submerged site of the former town of Harrison is today. And if this actually happened, it had to have been an arduous task, even with the courthouse being disassembled in Harrison and then reassembled in Ooltewah. The roads today are narrow and curvy, but at least they're paved. That would not have been the case in the 1870s. And so thus began the fractious and tumultuous 48-year existence of James County, Tennessee. It was created in dissatisfaction and resentment, and that really never ended. Harrison was never again to hold any degree of importance in any county it was in. Just as had been the case in Hamilton County, James County dealt with the constant strain of antagonism between the north and south ends of the county. Unlike in Hamilton County, however, there wasn't a great deal of industry. The county was mostly rural, and there was a diminished tax base comparatively due to this set of economic circumstances. It's hard to say whether things would have gone any better for James County if Harrison had been selected as the county seat. Frankly, the deck was stacked against the success of James County from the beginning. Ooltewah was difficult for those in the northern part of the county to reach, but Harrison was difficult for those in the southern part of the county. The roads of the time were poor. For the southern part of the county, the East Tennessee, Virginia, and Georgia rail system helped with travel, but that didn't go into the northern part of the county. It passed from Chattanooga through Ooltewah, traveling from west to east across the southern part of the county. The northern part of the county had to go west and ride the Tennessee River by boat for easier access. So the story was basically two counties under one name. The northern areas of the county relying on the Tennessee River and the southern areas relying on the railroad, and both constantly at odds with one another. In 1874, the original courthouse was completed, ostensibly using materials from the old Hamilton County Courthouse taken from Harrison. The first jail was completed in 1878, but burned sometime later. The exact date of this is now unknown. But the lack of revenue in the rural county meant that many infrastructure projects were either altogether unfunded or inadequately funded. And the two regions of the county retained a spirit of ill will in the governing of the county. In January 1890, that first courthouse burned and was believed to have been the result of arson, though I don't find that anyone was ever charged with the crime. 2 months later, the constitutionality of the creation of James County was debated in the Tennessee General Assembly, and efforts began to be made to repeal its creation. While I can't prove this, I'd say that the circumstances suggest that the efforts to invalidate the creation of James County may have come from some of the same folks who initially advocated its creation, or at least they likely came from the same areas where those earlier advocates resided. Some Tennessee stories really need to be seen as well as heard. For only 99 cents a month, you can come along with me through exclusive on-site videos and bonus content from across the volunteer state with a subscription to the Tennessee History Nerd Facebook page. Step inside the Ray County courtroom where the Scopes monkey trial unfolded. Walk the streets of Athens and see the places where the veterans returning from World War II fought to take back their town. And join me at historic sites, museums, courthouses, battlefields, and communities as I search for the stories that help shape Tennessee. Your subscription also helps to support the travel, research, and field work that make the Tennessee History Nerd possible. Visit the Tennessee History Nerd on Facebook, tap the subscribe button, and come explore Tennessee history with me. And now, let's get back to the story. And so, less than 20 years into its existence, James County was already facing an existential crisis. Newspaper editorials began advocating that James County would be far better served by being annexed by Hamilton County. Ironically, some of what inhibited those in Hamilton County from wanting to annex James County was politically motivated. Hamilton County maintained a Democratic majority. James County was solidly Republican, and even though James was a significantly smaller county in both area and population, it was nicknamed Little Jim. Political leaders in Hamilton County were concerned about that fairly solid block of Republican voters being added to the rolls of Hamilton County voters. Nevertheless, during the second session of the 46th General Assembly in Tennessee in 1890, an act was passed which abolished James County and restored its territories to the respective counties from which it had been formed, Hamilton and Bradley. The act was signed into law on March 11, 1890, by Governor Robert L. Taylor. It provided for the process of transferring all properties back to the respective parent counties, as well as court cases that were underway. And the debt of James County was to be divided proportionately between the two counties. It looked like those in the north end of James County were about to get their way and go back to Hamilton County. Things hadn't worked out the way they'd wanted when they basically seceded from Hamilton to create a new county, and it now looked like they were going back from where they'd started. But before the ink was even completely dry on the governor's signature, the leadership of James County basically said, "Not so fast, my friend." On April 12, 1890, James County filed a lawsuit against Hamilton County, charging that the act of the legislature was unconstitutional. The court issued an injunction to hold the implementation of the act, and there were a number of legal machinations that occurred through the next few months. Ultimately, it was determined that the issue would have to be heard by the Supreme Court of Tennessee. On October 4th, 1890, the court's decision in James County versus Hamilton County was that, quote, "The legislature has no power by its mere act, without a vote of the people to be affected, to abolish an established county and divide its territory among the adjoining counties," end quote. By this ruling, then, the court voided the act abolishing James County. Thus ended the first round of attempts to dissolve James County. And so Harrison, having already chosen to secede from one county to become part of another, already had established such secession as a means by which it could get its way. And so it again chose to try to secede, this time from James County, to return to Hamilton County, evidently seeing that as the lesser of two evils. In 1893, Harrison succeeded in its bid to return to the mother county, and its post office was officially transferred back to Hamilton County in August 1894. Harrison's failure to win the site of the county seat created a sort of domino effect of problems for James County. First of all, it created that local dissatisfaction that led to Harrison's return to Hamilton County. Secondly, it fed the flames of discord between the northern and southern areas of the county, in no small part due to the court ruling that had supported the disallowing of a substantial number of votes. The northern areas felt disenfranchised by the selection of Ooltewah as the county seat. In other words, the southern part of the county won the battle, but ultimately lost the war because after that, the northern communities along the Tennessee River and in the Long Savannah community never cooperated well with Ooltewah. Many of those northern residents struggled to reach Ooltewah whenever they had business there, thanks to the poor roads and even poorer funding to maintain them. And Harrison's defection back to Hamilton County in 1893 meant an additional depletion of an already weak tax base. James County had no road equipment. Improvised drags made of logs split in half and then dragged by horses had to serve as road graders. But getting stuck in the mud on James County roads was a frequent reality during wet weather. Meanwhile, Hamilton County, thanks to a growing tax base and to abundant industry, which James County was never able to attract, had the revenue to maintain its roads even in the rural areas. And of course, funding the construction of a new courthouse to replace the first one that burned in 1890 placed an additional strain on the already tenuous James County finances. In my recent interview at the Ray County Courthouse with former Ray County Circuit Court Clerk John Fine, when we were talking about the beauty and dignity of the old Ray County Courthouse, which was built about the same time as the second James County Courthouse, John said, "Back then, the nicest buildings in town were your school and your courthouse, and folks took pride in that. And a lot of the modern courthouses are sterile, and part of that's to keep costs down. But folks were very proud of their buildings. And I know our high school, if you look at the old pictures of the high school where Scopes taught, it was a beautiful building. So the problem for James County was that replacing a courthouse was an expensive proposition. This wasn't just a simple office building. It was a center of civic pride and a symbol for the community, and they would spare no expense, even if they really didn't have the money, to build an impressive structure they could be proud of. And so the turn of the 20th century revealed a James County that was continuing to struggle for all the reasons that we've already noted. It continued to deal with the lack of industry, with an insufficient tax base, with animosity between the different areas of the county. And there continued to be elements that were lobbying for a dissolution of the county. The 1890 Supreme Court case had settled the ability of the state legislature to preemptively act to dissolve the county. They had ruled that that could only happen with the consent of the people of the county. But there'd never stopped being a fairly significant part of the county's residents that wanted that and were lobbying for it. And then, in March 1913, the James County Courthouse burned again. And it was determined to be arson again. And when it burned with all the county records during another failed effort at consolidation, which did not pass the state legislature. According to Polly Donnelly's History of James County, the bloodhound chase the night the courthouse burned was, quote, of no avail, end quote. However, based on evidence discovered during the state fire marshal's investigation, the county clerk was charged with arson. But then the grand jury refused to indict him. Donnelly says that the clerk subsequently aligned himself with Northern County politicians during a bitter dispute over financing the county high school and its dormitory in Ooltewah. Whether that political realignment had anything to do with the failed indictment is unclear, but more on that dispute in a moment. Later in 1913, the James County Court, what the county legislative bodies were called in those days, allocated $11,000 for the construction of the third courthouse. This would be the equivalent of over $371,026. Remember, this was for a county that was already dealing with significant revenue collection issues. And furthermore, the North-South political fights were especially tense during this time, particularly regarding overspending on education. And we're now back to that topic. James County had authorized as much as $10,000 in bonds in 1909 for one or more county high schools. The James County High School was constructed at Ooltewah in 1910 for approximately $10,000. That's almost $352,026. Then a dormitory was added in September 1912. Some citizens resented the high school board and the expenditure on that dormitory. Because the county could not finance continued operations, the Ooltewah High School and dormitory were closed and leased from 1913 through 1915 to Sweetwater College, which continued offering high school curriculum there. In July 1915, the county agreed to levy a high school maintenance tax, but Northern leaders obtained the condition that a 2-year high school also be built at Birchwood, a community in the far north of the county. Given the difficulties with the roads, it may have been that the dormitory in Ooltewah was built so that students had a place to stay when the roads made travel difficult. And the distances involved, the state of the roads, and the nature of the types of transportation available to students would likely have necessitated that Northern County students traveling to Ooltewah have a place to stay throughout the week most of the school year. But the building of a high school in Birchwood in the northern end of the county probably made more sense from the perspective of northern students than a dormitory, especially when you consider that the cost per student would have been $8.72 per month for room and board in the dormitory. Over a 9-month school year, that would have been $78.48 per school year per student, or just over $2,726. Not an insignificant sum. Local students not needing to stay in the dormitory wouldn't incur such a cost. So, yes, the northern parents no doubt wanted a school in their own area. And to be clear, this is my reading of what I think were behind some of these moves, but that may not have been the case. How many stories can one small barrier island possibly hold? Enough for an entire podcast, and we're just getting started. This is Big John Summers, and when I'm not traveling across Tennessee, I'm down south exploring Dauphin Island, Mobile Bay, and the Alabama Gulf Coast for our sister podcast, Dauphin Island Diaries. You'll hear stories about Fort Gaines, the island's ancient shell mounds, Sand Island Lighthouse, Alabama's artificial reefs, the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, and much more. You'll also hear full-length conversations with island personalities and subject matter experts who help bring these Gulf Coast stories to life. It's the same boots-on-the-ground storytelling you enjoy on the Tennessee History Nerd taken to Mobile Bay and the Gulf Coast. Just search for Dauphin Island Diaries and follow it in your favorite podcast app. And now, let's get back to the Tennessee story. But losing part of the county's tax base back to Hamilton County, the failure to attract industry, the need to build 2 new courthouses because the old ones had been burned, inefficient educational spending, all of these things combined to push a struggling county into insolvency. Nevertheless, there were substantial arguments both for and against James County being dissolved and annexed by another county. One opponent to annexation from Ooltewah said, quote, "Union with Hamilton County will resemble too strikingly the union which a boa constrictor is fond of establishing between himself and a goat. After the union, it's all boa constrictor. The goat has disappeared," end quote. And even many in Hamilton County opposed the annexation as well, recognizing the impoverished state of the county's finances and the burden that would be assumed by Hamilton County if the annexation occurred, with one observer noting that such annexation would be like, quote, "the poor neighbors trying to move in with their rich cousins," end quote. By 1919, the situation in James County was reaching the breaking point for most citizens. On April 14, 1919, the General Assembly passed the bill to abolish James County, pending a referendum whereby the citizens of the county would vote on their desire to dissolve James County and proceed with annexation. And this bill was signed into law by the governor the next day. A separate bill signed on April 14th originally called for the county to be returned to its respective parent counties. However, those in the area which were due to be annexed back to Bradley County made it very clear that they wished to be included with Hamilton County and not be returned to Bradley County, largely due to the same issues that had led to their desire to leave Bradley County in 1871. The lack of good roads and communications with Cleveland still existed in 1919, and they felt more aligned with Chattanooga than Cleveland. The petition from this section of James County, along with a letter from someone named Squire Steele, were printed in one of the Chattanooga papers under the headline, "God Save Jim County," on the day that the General Assembly voted to divide James County. Steele opposed the division strongly and warned that it would be taken to the highest tribunal if it passed. And so, as seemed to be the case in dealing with James County, where everything seemed to have to be decided in court, litigation followed. But the referendum followed as well. The referendum was held throughout the county, including those in the area originally slated to be returned to Bradley County on December 11, 1919. The ballots were simple and clear. The voter was either for the abolishment of James County or against the abolishment of James County. In order for the referendum to pass, a 2/3 majority for the abolishment of the county was required. The certified election results, which according to tradition were counted while being guarded by at least one man with a shotgun, were very clear. 953 votes for the abolishment of James County and 78 votes against. The voting was said to have been the heaviest in James County's history and was a landslide for those favoring abolishment of the county, with over 92% in favor of the measure. The county school superintendent noted ironically that the measure to consolidate with Hamilton County was the only thing the county had ever agreed upon. It took the burning of 2 courthouses and nearly half a century of financial and population stagnation. James County's population was very close in 1919 to what it had been in 1871. But the annexation proponents finally had their victory. James County was being absorbed by Hamilton County. There is something of an epilogue to this story as well. First of all, James County had been dissolved with a great deal of indebtedness, and that debt load was assumed entirely by Hamilton County when the former James County was absorbed by Hamilton. And Hamilton didn't gain a great deal of tax base with that debt. That was the whole problem James County had from the beginning. But the last of the inherited James County bond indebtedness was finally paid off by Hamilton County in 1956, 37 years later, just over 3/4 the amount of time that James County itself had existed. The second part of the epilogue has to do with the act that provided that part of the county had been slated to return to Bradley County. But when that had been opposed in court, the court had upheld that objection and stated that the act was unconstitutional. But in all the fuss about the referendum, no one had ever thought to have that act that called for that area to go to Bradley County to be rectified by the General Assembly to instead allocate that portion of real estate to Hamilton County. Hamilton County had taken over all of the county, including Collegedale, the old Thatcher Switch area, and Apposon areas. But those areas I just noted, according to the act of the General Assembly, had originally been intended to be reincorporated with Bradley County. In a kind of weird situation, that oversight came out in a criminal court case in 1956, whereby a resident of Collegedale was charged with receiving and concealing stolen goods there. His attorney had entered a plea in abatement stating that the indictment was brought in the wrong county since the defendant's house was legally in Bradley County and not Hamilton County. The Hamilton County Criminal Court reviewed the evidence and dismissed the case as lacking lawful jurisdiction because of that legislative oversight in 1919's annexation. The Tennessee General Assembly in 1957 rectified this by changing the lines by law to show all of the former James County as now being part of Hamilton County. It was not until then that the book on James County was completely closed, although no one realized it in 1919. And so James County became the first county in the history of the United States and the only county in the history of the state of Tennessee to be annexed by another county. And thus, the state of Tennessee had 96 counties for about 37 years. James was the 94th, Moore was the 95th, and then Chester officially became the 96th in 1882. With the dissolution of James County, Chester is now the 95th county, but from the time Chester's formation was ratified until James was dissolved, Tennessee had 96 counties. And it's stood at 95 ever since 1919. Theoretically, the state constitution still allows for the creation of additional counties, but at this point, the only county in the state large enough, based on constitutional guidelines, to be split is Shelby County and its borderline. Constitutional guidelines require that the parent county retain a minimum of 500 square miles and that the new county be at least 275 square miles. Other than Shelby, which claims 783 square miles, no other county has enough area to qualify independently. However, it's also plausible that a county could be formed from parts of multiple counties, and that has happened multiple times in the state's history. But honestly, I'd be very surprised if there are ever any additional counties created in Tennessee. If anything, I think annexation like what happened with James County now would be more likely, and even that's a long shot. But who knows? So that's going to do it for this episode of Driving Across Tennessee. In this special episode, as we've driven across the forgotten county of James. It's been a bit unusual, and I hope you've enjoyed the diversion, But we did it this week because our next Driving Across Tennessee segment in 2 weeks will take us into Bradley County. And given that it had a role in the story of James County, I wanted to tell the story of that forgotten county first. And next week, we'll look at one of the best-selling whiskey brands in the world and the king of Tennessee whiskey, Jack Daniel, in From Jack to King. I hope you'll join us then. Until then, I'm Big John Summers, the Tennessee history nerd, and I am history. As is now my customary practice, before we close out completely today, I want to tell you about some of the sources used in preparing this episode. The most extensive source was James County, a Lost County of Tennessee, published in 1983 as a project of the Old James County chapter of the East Tennessee Historical Society and edited by Polly W. Donnelly. This collaborative volume brought together the work of several local historians drawing upon surviving records, newspapers, family papers, oral histories, and other materials gathered from across the Old James County communities. I also consulted James W. Livingood's History of Hamilton County and Zella Armstrong's The History of Hamilton County and Chattanooga, Tennessee, Volume 2. Both provided valuable historical context for Hamilton County, Dallas, Harrison, Ooltewah, and the creation and eventual disappearance of James County. Additional sources included James M. Monroe's Tennessee Encyclopedia article on James County and Bill Carey's article, The Lost County of Tennessee, published in the April 2018 edition of the Tennessee Magazine. I also relied upon legislative records, court information, maps, postal records, and historical markers reproduced or cited within these works, along with my own observations and photographs gathered while visiting Ooltewah, Harrison Bay, and other locations connected to the story, including trying to shoot a video segment outside the old James County Courthouse in Ooltewah in the middle of a driving thunderstorm. As occasionally happens with local history, some of the sources noted here don't agree on every date or detail. Where conflicts appeared, I compared the available accounts and tried to distinguish documented facts from reasonable historical interpretation. I'm profoundly grateful to these writers, historians, archivists, and especially for the assistance of the staff at the Katie Lamb Public Library in Collegedale, where I did some of my research. I couldn't do what I do without the assistance of good folks like these. And I sincerely thank all of you for listening and for your continued support. Tennessee history isn't found only in museums, courthouses, and archives. Sometimes it's preserved in a family story, an old photograph, or a memory that only you can share. If today's episode raised a question, brought back a memory, or reminded you of another Tennessee story that deserves to be told, I'd love to hear from you. Use the Send Fan Mail link in the episode description. Email me at john.summers@summersmediaenterprises.com or join the conversation on the Tennessee History Nerd Facebook page. And if you enjoyed this episode, help someone else discover it. Before you close your podcast app, share it with one person who loves Tennessee or wants to understand its history a little better. Your voice can help preserve Tennessee stories and introduce them to a new generation of listeners.